The first writers in residence came to the James Merrill House 25 years ago, shortly after James Merrill's death in 1995. Since then, over 80 writers have visited, staying in his home, a National Historic Landmark, to work on projects of their own. Thanks to Merrill's generosity, the house now belongs to the Stonington Village Improvement Association and is an ongoing inspiration for writers and poets from around the world. For more information, visit our website, jamesmerrillhouse.org. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the James Merrill House's latest event, today's conversation between Marlon James and Reginald Dwayne Betts. My name is Randy Bean, co-chair of the James Merrill House. Marlon James is no stranger to the James Merrill House. It was barely 6 months ago that Marlon was our James Merrill House annual lecturer. If you were not able to join this event at that time, I invite you to view the program recording on the James Merrill House Facebook or YouTube sites. We are delighted today to welcome Marlon back as the October 2021 James Merrill House Fellow. Welcome back, Marlon. It also gives us great pleasure today to welcome Reginald Dwayne Betts. Marlon James was born in Kingston, Jamaica in 1970 and is a graduate of the University of West Indies and an author of 4 novels, including A Brief History of 7 Killings, winner of the 2015 Man Booker Prize, and Black Leopard, Red Wolf, a finalist for the 2019 National Book Award for Fiction. Dwayne Betts is a class of 2021 MacArthur Fellow recipient, commonly referred to as the Genius Grant, and noted for promoting the humanity and rights of individuals who have been incarcerated. He is a poet and a lawyer, holding a JD from Yale University, where he is currently a PhD candidate in the law school. He is the author of 2 collections of poetry and a memoir, A Question of Freedom, a memoir of learning, survival, and coming of age in prison. Welcome to you both. We look forward to what I'm sure will be a deeply compelling conversation. The stage is yours.
Hey Marlon, what's going on, man?
Dwayne, what's going on? Nothing much. I'm here chilling in Stonington.
Is that
in the
Connecticut?
James Merrill House. It is Connecticut. It's James Merrill's house. I'm actually up here in the studio.
Yo, that's what's
So
happening, man.
yeah.
You know what? What I just realized is if you're in Connecticut, man, I gotta invite you to dinner. Before you, yeah, we got to do that. So it's interesting having this conversation because my first introduction to you outside of your work, my first in-person introduction to you was at AWP in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And somebody hit me up before I saw you, and they was like, "Yo, Marlon James," and I was like, "I am not Marlon James." And then I was like, and then when I saw you, I was like, "Yo, somebody just said that I was you," and you was like, "That's not as funny as you think it is." And so one of the things I think I would love to open it up with just asking is it's like writers living in the moment. I actually believe it's hard to reflect on how much our lives and careers changed based on the words that we put on paper. And this would have been because the first book of yours I read was A Brief History, right? And so this would have been after A Brief History. And I guess what I want to ask you is how much has what you aesthetically value and how you approach the narrative changed since the success of Brief History?
I mean, in a way, it hasn't, because I think it's funny. There's a picture. It's on Facebook of the day I got the first copy of Brief History, and right underneath that book is a book on African culture and African mythology. So I've been researching for Black Leopard from before Brief History even came out. So my head is always so far elsewhere that what's happening in the present really influences it.
That's so funny. Because it's so funny because like when I got this recent thing, this MacArthur, they were like, "Yo, how
that
do
little
you feel?"
thing.
Yeah, but nah, like I'm a convict though. You know what I mean? And I don't even say that like I say it to say that like my whole, and this is I think a lot of internally, like a lot of writers have to live the way you just described. Like we don't bet on what happens for the thing that we're doing. We're
Yeah.
always thinking about the next thing. And so when I got it,
Mm-hmm.
he was like, "How you respond?" I'm like, "Dude, I got a solo show. I got like 7 meetings this week. I'm trying to figure out how to be successful with this thing that I already bet on. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy about this other thing, but I am really deeply afraid that the current thing will be a failure, right?" And
Mm-hmm.
I guess thinking in that way, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is and it's funny that I want to ask you this question because writers tend to like not get asked about the responses that people have to their books.
Mm-hmm.
But before I ask you about the response to Black Leopard, I want to ask you like I've been reading a lot about Black history for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and and I was talking to my son about Black Leopard earlier, and he just read Things Fall Apart. And so
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about how like the twins would get put in the woods to get eaten by bears because
Mm-hmm.
of whatever, right? And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Yeah, that's like Things Fall Apart." And I wonder how much of your imaginative writing has been like how do you reconcile the need to educate and correct
Mm-hmm.
and criticize and think about like historical practices as you write?
Right. Um, man, there are a couple. Man, there are a lot of answers to that question. I think one. I think there's just. I think one. Just the fact that you're creating is a corrective to the kind of history that that certainly history I grew up with. I think the fact that we're writing and we're taking cues from not the usual cues, like Ram of the Ancient Mariner is great. I don't give a shit about it right now.
Right.
It's and I think even in that sense that just the act of creating while black kind of makes it black in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah.
But but I also think it's you maintain that by always reading. I think if you're a writer, you never stop being a reader. You never stop being a student of writing, and you never stop being excited by by books. And I think a lot of the sensibilities that I have about the world come from the books that I read about the world. Um,
Yeah. Shit, man, that got
mm,
me reading, thinking first. I feel like looking at your picture in mine,
mm.
the people who set up my lighting is the same people who set up OJ Simpson's lighting, you know. And, and,
You know what? Hey. Well, it's funny because at the same AWP, this guy came up and was talking to me for a while until he realized I wasn't Jason Reynolds. So, and that was poor guy. He
it
became
was,
that white guy, and it was a moment for him. I'm like, it's fine, it's fine.
it
Jason's
was
hot.
was cool is Jason wasn't really hot like that then. You know what I mean? Like to know who Jason Reynolds was to
Hmm.
be on point
Yeah.
and to be ahead of the curve.
Hmm.
And then the mistake another black dude for Jason Reynolds is to be like so far behind the curve. It was like, damn.
I just let him keep talking. It was ridiculous.
So let me, it's funny though because we were thinking about the sort of like the reading, and I do
Mm-hmm.
wonder. I listen to your podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I'm engrossed by the range that you have as a reader, and
Mm-hmm.
that might be reflected in my literal obsession with your past two books. But I ain't gonna
Mm-hmm.
front like Black Leopard. It's been the book because I grew up on fantasy. Actually, before I ask this other question,
Mm-hmm.
do you know who he wrote the Drizzt books? Who R.A. Salvatore is?
Mm-hmm.
You know this dude is the most racist writer in life. Like his whole frame is like it's a people that come from the underground who worship an
Mm-hmm.
evil spider goddess named Lilith, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Drizzt is a dark dro who everybody's afraid of when he comes above from the underground. And
Mm-hmm.
he's trying to like prove his humanity. Like the whole thing feels openly racist to me, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and this was the first fantasy novel I read.
Mm-hmm.
And what made me love the writing though, right? Um was two things. One, yo, everybody wants to be somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like this lie. Like I think that humans, we generally want to be loved. And to be
Mm-hmm.
loved, you want to do something that's worthy of love. And
Right.
and this is the center of what is the tragedy, I think, of Black Leopard, is that Tracker wants to do something to be loved.
Yeah.
And how do
Yeah.
you respond when the horrible shit has happened?
uh, y- y- I don't think Trucker realizes that's what he was looking for, though. And Lord knows I didn't realize it when I was writing it, because I remember somebody was calling the novel before Brief History, Book of Night Omen. Somebody was calling it a love story, and I was like, man, I don't do that shit, and that's dumb.
Yeah.
Um, but it wasn't. But in a way, it was, and it was in not just about love, but about the impossibility of it in certain it's certainly in that situation. Tracker doesn't realize he's looking for it, even though that's what he's looking for, and he doesn't feel complete until he finds it, and he loses he loses his whole humanity when he loses it again.
Well,
Uh, but it's
well,
not
my
something he
kid,
was looking for.
but that's what my kid said. My kid was like, "Well, he got to be a bad person if he killed a child." I was like,
Hmm.
"Well, I don't know." And I started talking to him about, you know, he wanted to kill a child that
Hmm.
had led to the death of everybody he loved.
Hmm.
And if I was his lawyer, like if I was the child's lawyer who had got
Hmm.
taken in by monsters,
Hmm.
I would have said the same thing about that child. Wait a minute. How do
Hmm.
we judge him given how he came up? And then if
Hmm.
I was Tracker's lawyer, I would have said, wait a minute. How do we judge him by how he came up? Which was
Yeah.
and the fucking Sansa Boosum
Hmm.
becomes his homie. So now well, no, not Sansa Boosum, but the electric
Yeah, but
dude.
yeah.
So what happens, and this is a beautiful thing you do in the writing, is that enough of the characters end up with a backstory, even if you didn't
Hmm.
know it before. So the person that becomes the lightning vampire, now
Hmm.
he has the backstory that you revealed to us.
Hmm.
I'm thinking about as an abolitionist, right? As a person that thinks about how do we respond to harm.
Yeah, but
What you
it's you
wrote
have
is a
to.
book that's really challenging because
Yeah.
who was guilty.
Well, that's a big question, because everybody's story is complicated, and I one of the things I learned from reading Toni Morrison was, just continue to make it complicated. Don't make any answer easy. If you read a novel like Beloved, you're gonna have to ask yourself the question: can murder be an act of love? It's everybody have a different answer to it, but you're gonna have to answer it if you're gonna read Beloved. Yeah, it's and I Tracker. I mean, Tracker, has these ends up with these really horrible alliances, but then you understand them, because he goes from having all this love to all this rage, and this child becomes the embodiment of it. And what do you do when a kid is not a kid anymore, but a symbol?
Oof.
Yeah.
It's so funny that I didn't even think of his
Mm.
alliances as horrible at the end. I,
Uh-huh.
in fact, Tracker became the mechanism that made me rethink how I imagine his alliances.
Hmm.
And I guess one thing I wonder is, man, I can't write a novel. I'm really arrogant. You know,
You sound like
I
me when I talk about poetry.
and so how do you do it though? Because for real,
Uh-huh.
my mom said, "Why is your piece called Kamala Harris, My Mother and Me?" And I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Yo, because like I like Kamala Harris, but I love you." And as a novelist, what I feel like is like you loved every character, and it's like, how do you do that?
You have to. I think, even the characters who are the villains, the bad people, the monsters, you have to love them, because if you don't, you end up writing a caricature.
Mhm.
And I can't laugh at people. Can laugh at my characters all they want. I can't laugh at them. People can hate them. I can't hate them, because it's I have to make them complicated. They have to become people. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of my stories are in first person, for example, is that at some point they kind of stop being fiction for me. They become people. And I think, I start to think, just they're like journalists or their biographer, or worse, I'm their eavesdropper. You know.
Yo, this is this is the this is my life story. I'm gonna tell you this story, right? And you're gonna think
Mhm.
this is bullshit. I go into a prison and I go to see this cat, John Lennon, right? And when
Mhm.
you go into a prison for a visit, you for a legal visit, you get into a separate room. But
Mhm.
afterwards, when your visit is over, you gotta wait to get transported out. And so they put you in a big room with everybody else.
Mhm.
And I sit closest to the CO, but I'm close to this cat that's visiting some woman that loves him, right?
Mhm.
And I'm watching, and a dude is writing, and I'm like, why is this nigga writing when there's somebody in front of him to see him? And then he said, "Yo, how you spell sacred?" And what I hear is, "How do you spell sacred in prison?" Which to me is a really profound question, right? But
Right.
also I'm thinking, yo, bro, you don't know how to spell sacred? Like I'm real judgmental. And I'm watching him write, and then he said, "Yo, I got it." And then he reads her a poem. And I was like, yo, this brother was writing a poem in a moment for her. I'm really impressed. And then you fast forward like 3 minutes. And if I told you the whole story, you'll realize that I spent 30 minutes listening to them and recording it in my head. But they start talking about books, and they talk about Tolstoy, and they talk about like Langston Hughes and James Baldwin and Japanese haiku. And what was really fascinating is that they were thinking about how books connect them to other people.
Right.
And my long-winded question is, one, I want to say that like Massachusetts has approved all of the books for the Freedom Library, and I've been sending your book in for years now to make people be like, just read it. And my man, my man was like, this is good. It's a lot of gay shit in here, though, And and I was like, and I wrote him back. I know actually we was on the phone. I was like, you mean there's a lot of sex in it? And he's like, yeah, but And what I realized is a powerful thing about books is it makes you like challenge the orthodox the way you see the world.
Yeah,
And
Jeanette Winterson. So Jeanette Winterson had this thing where she said the thing was dangerous about books is that or readings that reading is an act of free will and it's a private act.
mm,
It's just that people scared of it. It's just that people scared when they get caught reading. It's her mother used to say to her, the problem with a book is that, and I totally stole this line from her. She says, the problem with a book is that you don't know what it's going to do to you until you're too far into it.
ooh,
and that's what scares some people about books. About it's a lot. For some people, a book is not even a thing they're reading. It's the first conversation they're having. you know it's the first conversation with somebody who sort of see them the way they see the world, especially when you find a book that you connect with and you realize you're not just reading this book, you're in a conversation with this book, and you also finding yourself in it. You're seeing the book is either allowing you to see the world or the book is confirming how you always saw the world.
I want to ask you what's the first book that did that for you, but I will say that like Black Leopard did that for me. I mean, I read it
Hmm.
3 times, and I feel like I don't
It's
even
more
like
than
talking.
me.
Honestly, like I don't even like talking about it in a way because I talk
Hmm.
about it so much that people feel like I've seen people like stop me and say, "Yo, why don't you just write an essay?" You know what I mean? And I feel like, but what I do think it did, which is impressive, is like I've been to prison, and the book starts with prison, and it starts with a
Hmm.
confession, and it starts
Right.
with a kind of figuring out what it means to try to explain how you got to where you are, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But I think the other thing the book is, and fundamentally, I think the other thing the book is, which goes back to R.A. Salvatore, is it doesn't run away. What he did a great job of is like violence is violence,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and and fight scenes are fight scenes. What made you decide not to water down
Hmm.
violence for the reader?
You know what I mean. It's funny because it's not the only book where there is violence. Almost pretty much every novel I've written have violence, and I personally don't think it have as much as people think. But I also always used to say violence need to be violent. You know that if you read the scene of a hanging and you come across going, oh, I was touched, that's not a hanging.
Yeah.
If you read a story about the execution and you're not horrified, disgusting, I mean, it's when if you read somebody dying in an electric chair, you're supposed to smell sulfur and your room's supposed to be stink. You're
Yeah.
supposed you're supposed
And
to you're supposed to smell a book. You're not supposed to
and, and,
just read it and so on.
and
So it's yeah. So the violence, to me, it has to be real. I mean, when people say to me they're disturbed by it, I'm like, but you're supposed to be disturbed by it.
and yeah, I wasn't disturbed actually, but what I
Hmm.
wanted is like I'm afraid,
Hmm.
and like what I wonder is how this is like a craft question.
Right.
So some of it is just like the mechanics of writing out a fight scene, and that's what you do. That's on par with R.A. Salvatore. You write
Mm.
these intimate fight scenes in which it really does feel and Tracker loses a lot. He like Blast Joe. To be somebody who like stays alive, he gets his ass beat all the time, right? And what's lovely about it though is that like it reminds me that you could be good at something and lose. And that success isn't necessarily winning a single battle. But I guess what struck me is I don't know. I guess is this is an inarticulate question, but I do think I wonder what toll it takes on you. Because when I read it, and I read it a couple times, I wonder what toll it takes on you. And this is more a question for the next book than the Tracker book. But I wonder what toll it took on you.
You know what? It's that would have been I'd have given you a different answer if you asked me that about my second novel, which was about slavery, and it was about women enduring slavery, and that one did take a toll out of me. That one took a lot. I remember in the middle of writing that book, I just became so furious. I was so furious. I was so angry, man. I think I was at AWP. I was at AWP, and somebody asked me that really snooty question, like, "Why are you writing that book?" I just grabbed them. I was on a stage. I grabbed the mic, and I'm like, "To make sure none of you motherfuckers ever forget what you did to us." And then like, you know what? I need to take a step back. Maybe I need some therapy or so. But it's that book took a toll. It's because if you're writing about atrocity that happened to your people, it does. It took a toll. I was very furious. I think I had to read Charles Johnson's The Middle Passage to pull myself back and go, okay, this is still a novel, and it goes from a beginning, middle, and end. Fast forward to a book like Black Clover. Yeah.
But Charles Johnson's Middle Passage seems like it only works because it's the purest of revenge novels. It's like
it's like reading Count of Monte Cristo.
Yeah, it's like this is the dream.
But Middle Passage is also fun.
Yeah.
Which didn't make me write a fun book. That book of that one is not fun. But it still remind me that a novel, in a novel, characters should leave your novel different from what they enter it. No matter who they are. Even a slave whose life don't change much. She leaves the novel in a different place than she entered it. And that's what I remembered. But to go back to the violence thing, honestly, no. When I write novels, I really do think I'm sort of a journalist for imagined people. So I'm like, how I feel about it is irrelevant. I got to get the story, and I have to get all sides of it. I have to get it as human as possible, as detailed as possible. Which is the reason why I don't flinch from writing explicit violence. I actually, if it's two things I can't stand, is hinted violence and space break sex.
I know what hinted violence is, but I'm gonna admit something. Like sex is hard to write.
It's extremely difficult to write, and most literary fiction authors really can't do it.
And honestly, I think most of the cool people, like only the coolest people, keep having sex after like a certain age. Like like if you still vibrantly sexual at like 60, even
that's
52.
Old? I was gonna go. I'm 52 in like 2 years.
You 52 in 2 years? Get the fuck out of here, for real. I'm about to start lying about my age. You know that Richard Wright died at. I mean, one of my obsessions is with dying young, and it has no reason other than the fact that Richard Wright died at like 50, DMX died, Michael K. Williams died, and it fucks me up to think about what America and what the world just does to folks who think too much about what the world does to folks.
Yeah, but Toni Morrison lived though. So, you got to balance that. We're talking about truth speakers.
That's like the best answer to a question ever.
It's like, yeah, Toni Morrison lived, but I was going to answer what was the question you were saying I was going to answer? It wasn't about violence, although we were talking about that. But I have to sort of remember it's not about me. And a book is in some ways kind of testimony. You're writing a novel, you're kind of giving a deposition. And you have to tell, you just have to tell, you just have to tell the truth. I mean, stuff like violence, fair enough, some of those same rules apply to sex. Where I think, people shy away from it because they're afraid of doing it. So I have this joke I usually give. It's not a good joke, but I'm gonna give it anyway. Where I talk about Robert De Niro. And Robert De Niro is absolutely brilliant. He's one of the greatest actors we've ever had. But there are two things De Niro can't do. He cannot do funny, and he cannot do sexy. But he's managed to convince you that neither is important. And I think that's how some people treat violence and sex and plotting.
That's
Yeah,
well, plotting is your pet peeve, and I
yeah.
respect you. I respect plotting as your pet peeve because
Well,
I
I
think that
love
it's
plotting. I hate how
no.
people hate plotting.
That's what I'm saying, but I think I
Yeah, right,
think
right.
that it's the thing that where you bridge. I mean, the reason why you could write Black Leopard is
Mm-hmm.
because like plotting is literally it's a friendship.
Mm-hmm.
When it's certain like things that you have to do to make friends that
Mm-hmm.
romance novelists understand that any genre fiction they
Crime
understand.
novelists understand. Yeah,
Right,
crime
they get
novelists
it.
understand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like literary writers would be like, why do I need chronology?
Yeah.
it's
But
like it's like you know.
yeah, but it's also but these writers also understand research and understand learning the scene. It's when was the last time we have to ask a crime writer about cultural appropriation? We don't, cause they get it.
That's
You
true.
know, I don't have to talk to Richard. I don't have to tell Richard Price how to write The Wire.
Yeah.
Richard Price wrote The Wire.
Yeah.
We don't have this problem with the crime guys. We don't have this problem with the romance guys. We don't have this problem with the genre guys. It's the
But
literary
this is the
people have to get up their ass.
I mean, and the thing, and this is the to go back briefly to Nicole Hannah Jones and her piece about
Hmm.
Du Bois's Du Bois's book.
Hmm.
What she was saying is on the souls of black folks. She was talking about how she grew up in a household that read crime, that read genre fiction. They read the
Hmm.
mysteries, they read the romance novels, but her
Hmm.
people were educated, but they love that genre fiction
Hmm.
that paid attention to the details in a way that I do think that some literary writers avoid. Um,
Well, yeah, my background was kind of similar. I mean, my mom was a detective, my dad was a lawyer and became a judge. But for me, the only category I needed for a book was that it was next.
mm,
And if I could buy it, if I could borrow it, I could steal it. The first copy of 100 Years of Solitude I read, I stole. Don't come for me, people.
how old was you?
How was that? I'd have been 19. I mean, I even steal it. What is it? You know what it
I
was? It
stole a
was, it
book once.
was, huh?
I
Which
stole a
one?
book once.
Which one?
It's so cool, and it's called Figures of Speech by Arthur Quinn,
Yeah.
and I stole it from a university library. The they kind of did me wrong, and I was like, man, fuck it, man.
Yeah,
Let's just get back.
reparations.
Yeah.
See, the 100 Years of Solitude, it was a Spanish lit class. So I told myself, you shouldn't be reading a novel in English anyway. So I'm going to help you. I stole it. But the point I was getting to
Did you read it in
hmm?
Spanish though?
No, it was in English, what I'm saying. So she shouldn't have it in English. She was cheating.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
She was
Yeah.
cheating. It was a Spanish lit in Spanish class that she shouldn't have it in English. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna help you out. But what I was getting to is, you know, of course, also growing up in Jamaica, books weren't always lying around, and it's not like I was, yes, there was a library, but books weren't always easy to come by. So you come across any book, you read it. And so which meant, like as I said, the only category I had for a book was that it was next. So I remember once, so this is the days when Superstation TBS was still on TV, and I'm watching Return of the Jedi, no, Empire Strikes Back, and I know everything about Star Wars. I can tell you Star Wars back and front. And halfway through Empire Strikes Back, I'm going, hold on, I've never seen this film. I know everything I can tell you the width of the Cloud City. I know everything about it. And I realized I'd never seen it. And then I watched Star Trek Wrath of Khan. I'm like, hold on. This is the first time I'm watching this. And I realized what was happening. I couldn't get the movies, but there were novelizations of these movies in every pharmacy in Jamaica, or every backlot, or every book somebody threw away. If somebody threw out a book in the garbage, I'll pull it out, and it would be, Star Trek or Star Wars. And I realized even my film language was not film language; it was novelizations of films.
I think
So
that's
I did it everywhere.
it's interesting though, because one of the reasons why I started the Freedom Library, and so the Freedom Library, I started a project called Freedom Reads, and
Yeah,
I'm
tell
really
us some more
happy.
about that.
This is some bullshit, right? Because I say, oh, hold up, wait a minute. I got 3 of my homies out of prison, and one guy, his name is Christopher Sanstu. He was my cell partner for more than a year, and I tried to get him out for like 3-4 years, and I lost every time, and then I finally get him out, and he dies 6 months after he comes home.
Oh, sorry about that.
And actually, these pieces of paper, this is these sweats. I had him send me paper. I had him send me their sweats, and I told him I'll make paper out of it, right?
Right.
And I made paper out of it, and I put it in MoMA. We hung it up in the art gallery,
Oh, nice.
and but then I was like, that ain't freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And so my homie dies, and I sent the prison paper to Japan, and I had a writer turn them into kites, and she like floated the letters that my man wrote me into the paper.
Yeah.
And this joint actually has like the address of the parole board from when he wrote
Mm-hmm.
me years before I decided to be a lawyer, asked me to write the parole board.
Right.
And I was fucked up that he came home and he died 6 months later. And in some ways, books was at least the foundation of what I believe would allow me to have some kind of
Mm-hmm.
ability to help them get free. So I started a publishing
Yeah.
company, and I just wanted to do these books, 17
Mm-hmm.
classics, and have people write the introduction. And you write the introduction for Jane Austen. But the
Yeah, for
main
Pride
reason
and
I want to,
Prejudice.
yeah, for Pride and Prejudice. But the main reason is just like I do think that what has allowed me to understand the world in really profound ways is books. And a lot of those
Mm-hmm.
older books that you get, it's hard to get in prison. And so the
Mm-hmm.
Freedom Library is like this 500 book collection that's not placed in the prison library that's hard to reach, but in the housing
Mm-hmm.
unit. So every time you leave your cell, these books
Yeah.
are around you. And then you got these classics that I think are really deeply meaningful with
Mm-hmm.
introductions by writers who are contemporary writers. And so that's why I was happy
Yeah.
that you got down with it. But
Yeah. Yo,
but
tell
yeah,
me
it got
something though. What I want to know. What's one of the classics that was meaningful for you?
Count of Monte Cristo.
Yeah.
Actually
Right.
Count of Monte Cristo.
Because he dug his way out of prison.
Because I mean, who escapes from prison? It's a literal impossible thing to do. You know what I mean? It was the one that I read that
Papillon
made
did
me
it
think.
though.
I read but what I remember from Papillon, it's like
Yeah.
how to smuggle stuff into prison, like
Mm-hmm.
suitcasing and so Papillon was different because Papillon was a hustler and a survivor, and so
Mm-hmm.
he had details about what happened to survive that are sort of beyond the scope of generally what you understand about getting through
Mm-hmm.
prison if you don't know Papillon. Like I could imagine Papillon getting banned, and
Mm-hmm.
not because it should get banned, but because
Mm-hmm.
the suitcase, I learned how to suitcase things from Papillon.
Mm-hmm.
And a suitcase something means to hide contraband in your ass. And that is like
This
just not.
conversation took a whole different turn.
Yeah, you did it.
We're gonna
It's, it's
bring back the Count of Monte Cristo.
Count of Monte Cristo was better because Count of Monte Cristo had a happy ending. I don't even know if Papillon
Mhm.
had a happy ending, though I read
I
it.
can't remember either. I just remember the movie with Steve McQueen. But what? So you would say. What am I talking about? Count of Monte Cristo. It didn't give you, was it what, a idea of escape or what?
Nah, I already wanted to be a writer, and so I
Mm-hmm.
think what Count of Monte Cristo did to me is first, we all get wronged, and the question becomes, how do you respond to the wrong?
Right.
And if you could ever accumulate enough of whatever's necessary to have a meaningful response to the wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
so what Count of Monte Cristo gave me was like, it's possible.
Right.
It's
Right. Right.
it was almost like what's the other joint, the more contemporary version of County Monte Cristo, um, that I think we use this one too, and I can't believe I can think of the name of it right now. You'll know it because a lot it's controversial. Some people love it, some people don't. Daisy dies in the end.
Oh, I know of it, but I don't know it. I haven't read it.
You absolutely read this book.
Which book?
Shit, man, I can't.
Oh, you mean Gatsby?
Fitzgerald. Yeah, Gatsby.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you meant the book was called Daisy Dies at the End. I'm like, I don't know that book.
We should write a book called Daisy Dies at the End. No, Gatsby, right? Like I
Right.
read Gatsby, but Gatsby is like the Monte Cristo that seems to miss something. You know, you had to work
Yeah, but
hard to get
Gatsby
the
doesn't
freedom.
really have. Yeah, but the thing about I don't think Gatsby has the purpose that what is what is Monte Cristo's name again? Edmund. He doesn't have. He does even if I mean Edmund has more to go on more than just revenge. Um, Gatsby in a lot of ways is one of the first like heroes who don't really stand for anything.
Ah, that's true. And
Yeah,
it was Doom. I think Dumas was black though. That's the
yeah,
other
he was
thing.
black.
That's the other thing that got me about the Count of Monte Cristo. It's actually
Mm,
funny when you asked me that question about what classic really hit me. Is that
mm,
I think I've read a bunch of them over the years, but I did grow up on I grew up on like really on Donald Goins and Iceberg Slim,
mm. Right,
and
right, right,
then
right.
and then progress into the detectives, and then I read
Mm-hmm,
Faulkner, but I'm a heavier diet of like Steinbeck, a
mm-hmm,
heavier diet of like Weidman, really heavy diet of Weidman,
mm-hmm.
um, a heavy
Yeah,
diet of like you know.
Europe and where I grew up, you definitely read more Steinbeck than say Hemingway, and Steinbeck is a bigger influence on me than Hemingway. Also because I just read more Steinbeck.
I wanted to think about you as a writer. I feel like you as a writer is more, yeah, it's definitely more Faulkner than Steinbeck or Hemingway. In terms,
Yeah,
in terms of how you approach the sentence, I don't feel like it is like like you love a long sentence.
I love a long sentence, which I usually have my students not do, but I love them.
It's
Yeah.
hard.
Well, I think when I write, I still write as if it's gonna be read aloud,
Yo,
and I
yo,
think,
but do you think
no,
the audiobook was dope though? And I
yeah,
don't know. So what does that mean though, when you say you write if it's just going to be read aloud?
because I think it's something I think I don't know if I got it from Toni Morrison, but Toni Morrison certainly inspired me with that. That when she was talking, I was reading this essay of hers, and she's talking about how she doesn't get why people compare her to Joyce or even to Faulkner. She thinks it's great; they're great writers, and it's always great to be compared to a great writer. But she always thought that what she was doing had more in common with a blues song or a church sermon.
She was
And
bugging.
no, but I get what she's saying though. It's meaning that it's there is a oral quality to her prose and to black prose that you don't necessarily read in other kind of literature. That you still read it like you're supposed to read it aloud.
That's true, but do you think that like Irish folks would say that of Dubliners? Because the one thing that I think is similar, I mean, I
Mm,
had to read Paradise twice before I understood it, and
mm-hmm,
I wonder if her reflection is more akin to like how she hears her work and not
mm,
necessarily to how others hear her work. Because I've talked to people that was like mostly white people, just like yo,
mm-hmm,
I can't understand the like I can't understand the words in brief history, and I'm like, he's fucking writing in English. Like, get over
mm-hmm,
it, you know. And if you and I'm like, do you hear it? And they like, and it's fucked up. I said that to somebody, and you
mm-hmm.
know what they said?
No.
No. And I was like, what? And I couldn't. But I grew up on like reggae. I mean, and I grew
Mm-hmm,
up on dialect, and I grew up on the idea that I was excited by the fact that a book sounded on a page, not like
mm-hmm.
I sounded, but like I thought words sounded. And so I imagine that, like when Morrison says that, maybe part of what I think that she might not be grasping is that for us, when we begin to love Dubliners, it's because we
Mm-hmm.
begin to figure out how it's like her. Because for Irish folks, they think Dubliners is like her off the rip. They think
Mm-hmm.
it's oral and they think you gotta hear it. But when I read Dubliners, I'm like, I don't want a PhD in English. And
Yeah,
George
but I wonder
Saunders,
if
you know,
yeah, but hold on though. But when she says she read it to be heard, who you think she thinks is listening? Because I don't know if she if it matters to her you know, that if black people hear it, but white people have to read it, I think she's cool with that. In the same way that I think I get it when people say they hear Dubliners, because it's a really lyrical book. It's one of my favorite. It's one of my probably top 5 books. Even if we ever talk about Dubliners, the first thing I ever wrote was a story for story response to Dubliners, which I hope nobody ever reads. Dwayne, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm trying to bootleg that. Who has a copy of that?
No, I think the only person I've copied that is my mother. So no, but you know, it's I don't know, because I don't know if what we're saying is that orality people can't learn it, because I think I learned Huckleberry Finn, and I'm not sure that was written for me. I think I can pick up what's good. As God knows I can pick up. I mean, granted it's a play, but I can certainly pick up Shakespeare,
And that's
which I
hard. I
know
mean,
was
I
written for
just
me.
talked about my kid about Shakespeare, and I think talking to young people reminds you of how complex this is.
Hmm
Because we were just talking about one scene, and he was like, "Wait a minute," and so you got all that out of that one scene. And he was like, "I'm 13. This is just no, you know." And it
Yeah.
made me, it made me think about what we expect folks to get out of literature generally, and how do
hmm
we mitigate that as educators? Because sometimes the books do I mean, they should outpace the
hmm
reader. That's why you
Yeah.
go back to it, you know?
Last time I was teaching a Shakespeare thing, I had to say, you know how the verse in "Say My Name" is super long?
Yeah.
Yeah. Next time you read a soliloquy, think about that. How long the verse to "Say My Name" is. "Say My Name" verse is longer than a typical rap verse. So
I'm now I'm gonna have to go back to it.
you don't have to bring Beyonce into this conversation at some point.
Somebody asked me, and then I'm gonna ask you about Sogalon, but somebody said,
Mhm.
why don't you like bell hooks? And I was like, well, sadly, bell hooks called Beyonce terrorist, and I've been beefing
Mhm.
ever since. you know?
Yeah, kind of.
Eh,
I'm not feeling that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask you this.
Mhm.
Both what have you been working on at Merrill House? But I assume that you've been
Mhm.
working on the new book.
Mhm.
And I think what you've done though is in Tracker. Track is a character that really contemplates what it means to be a dude in the world and a
Mhm.
struggle and
Mhm.
what it means to learn how to love and to lose love. And I think
Mhm.
maybe to fail at remorse.
Mhm.
Ultimately, like the book ends with him in a cell, fundamentally at that moment failing at remorsefulness, failing at like he
Mhm.
is still.
Yeah.
And I
It's
wonder
funny.
what you think about Tracker, and then I want to talk about
Mhm.
Sogalon.
I mean, I actually had to learn to love that character. In a sense that Tracker for a while didn't really stand for anything either.
Yeah.
And in a way he also says it, because he didn't know and I didn't know that Tracker was looking for love. And if you told me that when I was writing it, I go, nah, dude, I don't write that shit. Um, it's and I think that is because he's the last person to pick up that's what he's looking for. And he discovered it around the same time I discovered it, which is almost near the end of the book. So Tracker,
That's
it's
so
funny
funny because I
because
thought that from the very beginning.
yeah, well, man, yeah,
Only
when
child,
you're
only.
writing, yeah, but writing a book is different from reading a book. Sometimes I think writing a book you're still flying blind.
No, I want 100% agree with that, but I want to just
Mm,
say that like when I read it, my
mm-hmm,
emotion response, like I felt like Tracker, and this
yeah.
is all what every good book does though, is make you feel like the character that you love. So I've been Tracker,
Mm,
I've been
mm,
Sogalon, I've been Leopard. I was
yeah,
really sad when I was sad Ogo. Like
yeah.
what happens is like you become all of these characters, and what's interesting is to
Mm,
talk to you and think about how you couldn't be any other characters because you had to be all of
mm.
them.
Yeah. So I know, so Moonwitch Sierra King, which is this is just a print, but it's not the actual book. It just looks pretty. Um, Moonwitch. So Moonwitch is about Sargon, and Sargon also ends the book the way Tracker ends the book in prison. But Soglan ends in a different way. Soglan isn't like fronting that she's not distraught. Tracker is distraught, still trying to be cute.
He is.
but he distraught.
Yeah.
Sutherland is like, oh, I'm just bad in time here for 9 years, then I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, this just felt like the closest thing to anything interesting, sir. But I'm out in 9 years. You don't even have a choice about this. But because Sutherland, Sutherland's journey through this thing is very different. Sutherland's story starts a good like 170, a good 160 years before Black Leopard Railroad starts.
Which
Yeah.
is sad. I mean, but it's sad in a way that, like, intellectually, I feel like that's how
Hmm.
I feel like with like my wife. Like I feel like my understanding of the world is like 160 years after her shit. You know what I mean? It is
Yeah.
something about reading track that makes you feel like when I read the beginning of the new joint,
Hmm.
I just like, fuck, man. I wish Tracker knew that. And I'd be reading and wondering, like how would he might have been a different person? Because in some ways,
Hmm.
like Sogalon suffered like his mom suffered, and
Hmm.
like Tracker had no room to imagine
Yeah.
like his mother wasn't a villain.
Yeah. People don't listen to black women though.
Shit, that shit is rough. You know what I
they,
mean? That shit is
they
like,
really don't. They're really, they're really don't. Ask Serena Williams, ask Beyonce. They don't listen to black women. They certainly don't listen to their pain. It's that's why somebody like Tracker don't know, or he learns the hard way.
so
Um,
why do you know though? Because you do. I will cop to the fact that like when I read the first part of Sogalon, it fucked me up. I was like, she's a fucking witch. What do you mean she's not a witch? And wait a minute. These things couldn't have happened to her. I made all these decisions about who she is. You know, I was like, man, maybe if I could send him an email, he could revise this and like make it. So like, I wonder, like, how do in his tongue and cheek, but like, how do you know?
when I was writing Black Leopard, I didn't know because I was doing what Tracker did, which is like, perceive people the way the way he is, and the thing about Tracker Testament, he's still ultimately just one guy's opinion. And I've always been, it's not the first book that I've done this, but I've always been interested in the person who you don't know and what's their story. My second novel happened that way. My second novel wasn't supposed to happen. It didn't start out that way. It started out, it was set. So, Book of Night Woman is set in 1794 to 1802. That's when I started writing it. It was set in like 1832, and it was somebody telling me about some old woman named Lilith, and me, as usual, getting super excited about some brand new character, and allowed her to take away the book from me. So but the point being that I never, I wouldn't have imagined anything about this character if I didn't go over there. And I think that's the same thing rewriting writing this character who was a pretty big character in the previous book, but in a different way, and to then view it from her side. And it's not just let me just tell you what happened in the previous story. It's like you don't even think you know the real. That's not even the real story. And sometimes that's it too. It was the thing I had to do with this second book is, even if it was her perspective, I couldn't have it be basically some woman takes on a man, or some woman's version of a man's story. 'Cause that would have been easy, but that wouldn't have solved the problem.
I wanna read one line from here. It's a couple lines it's a thousand lines that I thought was like really compelling. And I think like
Mm,
in the writing, you got two things that happen though, right? You got like really interesting like moments that's just in the story,
mm-hmm,
and dialogue and how characters interact. And then you got shit that jumps out. Now I'll tell you, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday. It was this woman and a friend of mine. It was three of us, right?
mm,
And she said, every man has hurt a woman sexually.
mm-hmm.
And I thought, who the fuck you think you talking to? You know what I mean? I was like, yo, are you like literally indicting me right here?
Hmm.
And then we talked, and I was like, fuck. And we came to the conclusion that like every woman we know has been violated in some way by a man. And I
Hmm.
couldn't disagree just based on conversations I had. And part of it was rooted in like what men don't know. But it was this line that Sokolon says early as a teenager. She says,
Hmm.
it's the narrator that says this, but she says, the narrator says, Sokolon grow up all these years taking stock of what men say and weighing it for danger. And the first when I read that and I highlighted it, I thought Tracker doesn't write and speak from that knowledge. And I guess one of the things I wonder is the book is very much existing in some kind of parallel universe from our own, but we'll have conversations about it. And I just
Yeah.
you know, maybe it's not even a parallel universe, but I mean, I can't turn into a panther. I've tried, like that's the parallel universe part of it.
Yeah.
And I just wonder what you want us to get from it's really some deep kernels about how we hurt each other and how we love each other in the book. And I wonder how you as a writer would love to see the world respond to it.
Well, I think you know what. I still believe what Margaret Atwood said once. She said it at Penworld Voices probably over 10 years ago, but I never forgot it. She says human nature hasn't changed in 1,000 years, and we know by checking the mythology. And as somebody who is in a way playing with mythologies with this book with myths, I wanted to I was using it to remind us about human nature and they there's violence in this new book, but it's not the same as Brief History. It's not the same as even Black Leopard, Red Wolf. That some of the violence that's done to Sogala, nobody even strike her.
Right.
And yeah, she does sort of she enter each room going, okay, what kind of damage are these people going to try to cause me?
But even this scene, I think that you do a really great job, a compelling job of like you allow for surprise. So Sogalon says that because she's surprised by how the unnamed escort is treating her. Like that idea doesn't come out from danger; it comes out from the surprise at the absence of danger.
Right, but she expecting it, and I
Yeah,
think that in some ways it's her way of survival to kind of expect it. But I don't think she is. I mean, the thing is, she's also not the most jaded character I've written. I've written people more jaded than her. Sogolon is, one thing that I think Sogolon have in common with Trucker is that she too is surprised by love.
and she's powerful, and so is
Yeah,
Tracker. Like
yeah. But there's
like
a scene in it where she was amazed because I was amazed. It's a chapter in it where she just starts, "I am a woman with children. Hear me call their names."
mm,
And it's like because it kind of stunned her. She's like, wake up one day and go, what is this? Who are these people? And it stuns her that her life has turned in that direction because she wasn't expecting it. She certainly didn't have high hopes for anybody,
I,
including Kemek,
I think that
the person she ends up with.
the sort of one of the things, right? Like one, I'm impressed that this second book comes out so quickly after the first book, and
I'm
and
shocked, and I
and
wrote it.
for real. And two, honestly, man, the thing about mythology and give you a sense of what to believe in, what I really think is powerful about it, and why I sent it to all of my folks, right?
Mm,
It's because I think when you begin to read it and talk about it, it does that thing mythology does, which is gives you space to imagine what your
mm-hmm.
life looks like. And it ain't just Tracker, it's so many
Yeah.
people in Black Leopard that you like, yo, I fit into the decision makings of this scene. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, it might just be it was a story that might go viral about some fathers, right? Who
Mm-hmm.
decided to go to their high school because there was so much violence in the high school.
Mm-hmm.
But in some ways, they were just trying to be heroic, in whatever like
Mm-hmm.
lame way I may frame it. They were just trying
Mm-hmm.
to like fit into a narrative that says like, I can't send my kid to another school. If I show up, maybe they'll stop fighting each other. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's something of that in like every page of your books that just says, how do people decide to be present in a
Mm-hmm.
way that so many other people in the world that you created decide not to be present? And
Mm-hmm.
I guess so. One more question I got for you really is like,
Mm-hmm.
you choose fiction, and I've seen you write nonfiction before, but you choose fiction and you choose these imaginative landscapes to make us think about the world and to make us think about the world that we live in. I wonder why choose fiction over everything else, because you're good at it. So like writing, if you could write fiction, you can write whatever you want. I
Yeah.
don't believe I can write fiction. I believe you can
Yeah.
write poetry. So why choose fiction?
I pretty sure I can write poetry. So I can teach the hell of a poem though. It's funny. A lot of the student projects I work on in college are poetry projects. So I can get a good poem out of a poet. I can't write one. Um, you know what? I I think the funny thing about I'm always amazed. I'm always amazed when people talk about how horrible and how difficult and how painful writing is, and it's all of those things. Yes, but there are times when I do feel like I'm cheating. I do feel like this is too good. I don't mean the book is too good. I mean the life of a writer is or being able to write books is too good. And I think the reason why it feels that way to me that I'm almost cheating is that I really believe that thing. I think Tori Tempest Williams said it. It may have been her or it may have been Patricia Hampel. Funny enough, both nonfiction. One of them said, "I write so I could have more than one life," which is a hell of a thing for a nonfiction person to say because they're writing about themselves. You know?
Well, I was so agreeing with that, and now I'm like, oh, maybe, you know.
Yeah, I know one of the two of them say that both write memoir. So, but
I
that is what I do in
but I
fiction. I
hadn't.
write so I can have more than one life.
But honestly though, when I became a better writer, it's the New York Times was like, well, we need to fact check this, and I was like, that's cool. And it's like, all right, can we talk to your wife? What the fuck you want to talk to my wife for? like, what you mean? You think I'm lying? You know? And then I'm like, all right, fuck it. Here go a number. And they call her, and they talk to her. And they're like, yeah, your wife says, yo, her name is Therese. Don't call her my wife, And I'm just being like ignorant for no reason. They're like, yo, your wife says that she remembers things differently. What? Differently? I was there. Like, what do you mean she doesn't? And I had to like rearrange a whole passage. And what struck me is that I began to think that like, I would be a better writer if I cared about other people. And not even cared about other people because I did, but I cared about other people through my own like lens and not imagining them as a full person,
Right.
right? But imagining them as the narrow person I thought I needed to protect, or I thought needed to say something that made me look good.
I think what you're saying is exactly what it is about how to write fiction. I think especially if you're gonna write the fiction I write with like 2 dozen people, you really have to care about other people, and you really have to start as everybody's a hero of their story,
Yep.
and you have to write them with a point of view that they're the hero of the story, even if they're dead wrong.
Right.
The facts can prove them wrong. Their actions can prove them wrong. They can sometimes see the world in a way that's not how the world works. But you still have to write it the way they see it, that they're the hero of the story. But you do have to care. You do have to care about other people. That's why I don't believe in this whole idea about reclusive authors. Like people think Thomas Pynchon is a recluse. He's not a recluse. He's just not into the bullshit.
And he's not
But
into us, but
yeah,
he's into some
yeah,
people he's into.
yeah, he's not a recluse. H.P. Lovecraft was a recluse, which is why his characters are shit.
Let me
It's why his dialogue is awful.
let me ask you this as we end.
Hmm.
I don't believe in asking people what they would do if they didn't write because I feel like I feel like yo,
Hmm.
who cares what you would do if you didn't write? I care about what you
Hmm.
do that you write, but I am interested not in what book you want to write that has been already written.
Hmm.
I morbidly believe that like prison dooms you and it's some time clock that's telling me that shit is going to end at some point.
Hmm.
Some of our writers have actually lived to 80.
Hmm.
And I wonder what book would you write if you started working on when you were 70 and you had a good 10, 15 years left.
Uh-huh.
What book, what themes, I guess, would you imagine approaching 20 years from now?
You know what? Maybe that would be maybe then I would finally feel the need to write something sort of autobiographical, because I don't feel that yet, you know. Or you know, one of my big heroes is Penelope Fitzgerald. And every time people talk about, oh, I'm too old to start writing about, like Penelope Fitzgerald's career technically started at 60. And she still wrote a lot of books, and nearly all of them perfect. Yeah, I think then I would want to write. I think then I'd probably start writing stuff closer to home. I mean, I don't have. It's funny because I don't have children, but then I think older, I start to think of, do people might know my work, but do they know enough of who I am? And I think I don't really give a damn about that now. But I don't know if I might care more about it now when I'm more, when I'm like, if I'm still writing at 80. Man, I hope I am.
All right. So now I got the next book, the 10th book from now that I'm waiting for is the biography of Marlon James, and that's a bet.
Randy's back.
Yes. Thank you both for a powerful and frank conversation. It was a great discussion of literature and a lot of really interesting themes. So thank you for your time today, both Marlon and Dwayne. And on behalf of the James Merrill House, thank you to our audience. We encourage you to to follow the James Merrill House on Facebook and Twitter, and visit us at jamesmerrillhouse.org. On behalf of the James Merrill House, thank you and good evening, everyone.
The first writers and residents came to the James Merrill House 25 years ago, shortly after James Merrill's death in 1995. Since then, over 80 writers have visited, staying in his home, a National Historic Landmark, to work on projects of their own. Thanks to Merrill's generosity, the house now belongs to the Stonington Village Improvement Association and is an ongoing inspiration for writers and poets from around the world. For more information, visit our website, jamesmerrillhouse.org. Thank you.